Welcome to the Monday, August 8th Maplewood City Council meeting. To start off tonight, I have an important, I guess it's a public service announcement, concerning a water service interruption in the city of Maplewood this afternoon, and I'll read the report. It's also going to be on our city website. So here's the information that is important. St. Paul Regional Water Services has issued a boil water advisory for the area served by the BB Road pump station. Earlier today, the pump went down due to an Xcel Energy outage that caused low water pressure. The pump is back up and running, and a water boil advisory was issued as standard precaution. It is unlikely, but there is a chance that contaminants entered the distribution system due to the loss of water pressure. Customers in the affected areas in Maplewood and St. Paul are being asked to boil water for 3 minutes before using it for cooking, drinking, or brushing your teeth, or use bottled water. The boil advisory will be in effect until at least noon tomorrow. There is no evidence that contamination has entered the distribution system. St. Paul Regional Water Services will conduct several more water sample tests before lifting the water boil advisory. Areas affected are generally bounded by Holloway Avenue in the north to Conway in the south. The northern part runs from 7th Avenue East and Division Street to Century, and further south from McKnight to Century. For a full impact area map, go to our website at maplewoodmn.gov, and you can see the information there and determine whether or not your residence or your business is within that affected area. So with that, that is pretty important information. I wanted to start our council meeting tonight, too, by talking about something that was pretty important that happened in Maplewood, and it reflects really on something that's happening in St. Paul. This Wednesday, Major League Soccer will hold its All-Star game at Allianz Field, which is home of the Minnesota United, also known as the Loons. Now, the kickoff for the All-Star celebration this week occurred right here in Maplewood. This weekend, we had the rededication of the Fred Abbott soccer field, which is located on County Road C. Fred Abbott was asked in 1974, I believe, to start a youth soccer program in town, and he started with 17 kids, and it grew to 1,700 kids within 10 years. Now, Fred Abbott is no longer alive, but his son, Mark Abbott, he grew up in Oakdale. He attended Tartan High School, and today he happens to be the president and deputy commissioner of Major League Soccer. I was honored to read a proclamation that the city council did at that time. George Rosbach was the mayor. Peter Fisher was on the Parks Commission at the time. And it was I read the original proclamation, which named the field after Fred Abbott. It was really quite a big event as the kickoff for the All-Star game this week, in that there were a number of All-Star players that were there. Bill McGuire, who is the owner of the Loons, was there. Of course, the Abbott family was there. We did the rededication, which was very nice. They had a kids' workshop for soccer, and there was an awful lot of media that was there, too, and it all happened here in Maplewood. So if you go out to the Fred Abbott Field, you will see the proclamation from 1999 dedicating the field to Fred Abbott. And also there's some information there on kind of the history of soccer in Maplewood. So I thought it was a really neat connection that Maplewood has to today what we're seeing this week as the big soccer all-star game that's happening in the Twin Cities. I want to thank our parks folks. I know Audra Robbins and Neil Brenneman were very instrumental in working with the Abbott family in getting the plaques done and helping out with organizing that event. It was really fun, and I certainly learned something I learned a little bit something about soccer, which I didn't know, but I also didn't realize that Maplewood had such a connection to soccer and the development of soccer in the Twin Cities. So that was really kind of fun. So, council members, let us start off with our Pledge of Allegiance tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Clerk Sint, would you do the roll call for us?
Councilmember Juniman?
Here.
Councilmember Knutson?
Here.
Councilmember Villavicencio?
Here.
Councilmember Cave? Here. Mayor Abrams?
I'm here as well. Thank you. Council members, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Cave, a motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Juniman.
Under council presentations, purple line information, I can't even talk.
Okay. And I would like to add, highlighting a couple of new businesses in Maplewood, Becker Furniture and Creative Kids Academy, and also the upcoming Rice Larpenter Summer Block Party. And finally, just a little recap of our National Night Out. Anyone else?
Mayor,
Councilmember Villavicencio.
I just want to report on my ride-along with the police department.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, all right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, council members, let's move on to the approval of the agenda. The July 25th City Council Workshop Meeting Minutes. Is there a motion?
I move approval. Oh, sorry.
Moved by Knutson. Do you want yours to be a second? Seconded by Juniman. The motion to approve the July 25th, 2022 City Council Workshop Meeting Minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to the July 25th, 2022 City Council Meeting Minutes. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Knutson, seconded by Juniman, the motion to approve the July 25th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to administrative presentations. Council calendar update. City Manager Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor Abrams, members of the City Council. On the council calendar, coming up on this Friday, we will have a special council meeting at 4 p.m. to canvass the primary election results. On August 22nd is not going to happen. That was our budget meeting. That's been moved now to the 29th of August. And that is for us, we're going to first talk at 5 o'clock with our consultants on the compensation study, on their findings on our pay plans, and then after that, we will have a workshop back in council chambers on the budget. We're also going to have a workshop on September 12th on update on our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from a staff perspective. And we will, on September 12th, also adopt the preliminary 2023 budget. On items that we were working on your behalf, the research on the lead pipe replacement program, the information was compiled with a lot of work from our finance director and Steve Love, our public works director, and that information was put in the FYI last Friday. If there's any follow-up or questions that you have, please let me know. Homeless encampments, I am including a report on that in the weekly FYI as well. And then cannabis legislation, that's actually on tonight's under new business. So with that, Mayor, I don't have anything else to report on our calendar, but I'm happy to hear any things of interest you might have for staff to look into on your behalf.
Okay, council members, is there anything else to add?
I have a question.
Councilmember Juniman.
Are we having a workshop on the 22nd of?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
That will be canceled and in replacement on the 29th.
Got it, thank you.
City Manager Coleman, perhaps you can give us an update, because I get lots of questions and positive comments about the goats. And the goats are are not there right now. That's
right.
Do you want to explain the goats?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. The goats left today. They munched down everything in sight on our campus. Last portions that were done this morning. They are gone. They're going to rest for 30 days. Evidently, their stomachs have to kind of work through all that food they ate. And they'll be back to do round 2, which is where they go in and then just sort of eat up all the new sprouts that grow of buckthorn and other things we don't want on our city properties. So it's another phase is coming. So if you didn't get to see the goats the first time, there will be another opportunity to do so.
After 30 days.
Yes.
And then the goal is to, do you want to explain kind of what, because we did receive grants for the goats and for the next step. Do you want to explain a little bit about the next step?
So we got some grants from Great
River Greening.
Yeah, you never can say that. Great Greening, and some other.
It's through the legacy amendment.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. So we got grant funding for that, and that's helping to get the buckthorn out of here. And then we'll be planting new plants in its place that are more native to Minnesota, and that we hope will also encourage pollination.
Okay.
And it
Thank you
did
very
put us
much.
on the map once again, since it was covered on the news that we had goats in Maplewood.
Yes, it was. The goats made it to the news. I did catch that. And I have to say that, council members, I don't know about you, but I have had a lot of comments
Yes.
about the goats and people going and showing up with their grandchildren.
Yes.
And childcare is going over there and doing little field trips to go check out the goats. So I have to say it was a really fun way to, a sustainable way to clean out buckthorn, and we didn't have to use any chemicals.
Wasn't there an actor that said, "Don't ever share a stage with an animal"?
Well, you know,
There you go.
yeah, they were a hit. They've been a hit. I've had a lot of comments about the goats.
And Mayor, just, it's a little unofficial, but the people in the environmental department were trying to figure out cost, and there was a loose conversation, but it was, I think it was a half acre that we had cleared by a company, so it was people and chemicals to put up the new fire station. And that was, I believe, $6,000. And the goats could clear 5 acres for $9,000. So you figure it out. Plus, they're more entertaining than a chemical company, so.
They're very entertaining. And I
Yes.
will say that I did receive a call from another mayor wanting to know, they saw the goats on TV, and wanting to know, how did we get the goats here? Because he's hearing a lot in his community, why can't we have goats? Because Maplewood has goats. So I referred him to Audra Robbins to get the information about the goats.
Cool.
So, there you go, a lot of fun. Okay, Councilmember Juniman, you had something adding on to council presentation.
Yes, it's just purple line information for people who are following this and wondering what's going on. There's kind of been what we call a lull, and there's an updating information, and I believe it's on the city website, both Facebook and the website, I believe, the information that we were all sent last week, so people know where we are. But they are slowing the thing way down, and they're retooling the routes and the funding and the whole thing, so people can calm down a little and just try and follow where we are now. But it has been slowed down, the process has been slowed down.
Thank you. And one thing I have to say, too, is I think the Minneapolis paper is doing a good job of reporting.
Right.
That's where it was reported about the federal funds being cut.
Right.
That wasn't, or I haven't seen that in the St. Paul paper.
No, I
but
haven't either.
yeah, so if you want more information, you can look on our city website.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Villavicencio.
Oh, I just want to share with everybody that I got to do my second ride-along with Officer Sudkamp, and it was this last Thursday night, and it was a pretty peaceful and calm night. But I really, so obviously that's a blessing. But I was extremely appreciative of our director and Officer Sudkamp, and just showing the importance of the intensity that they show throughout their whole shift, and how much they have to pay attention to, and that they're the front line of our city, and how important that is to the safety and security and wellness of our residents. And I think it's a good reminder for myself too, to just do that. So I appreciate and enjoy, and I really appreciate to the Public Safety Department and how open y'all are to me always, and answering my questions, even if they're silly or whatever. But so yeah, I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a couple of things too. A couple of new businesses in town. Becker Furniture, we all saw it, the building on the outside. It used to be Toys R Us over near the mall. Becker Furniture is now open for business. I stopped by there this past weekend because they have a big "for it's open" sign. I didn't realize that it was opening so quickly. And also, I got the honor of cutting the ribbon at Creative Kids Academy a couple of weeks ago, which is a new child care that we all know that we need more child care. And so that's really exciting to have a new, really a very fun-looking child care facility that is going to be able to take 55 kids. And it was colorful and fun, and it looked like a really great place for kids. So 2 new places in Maplewood that have opened up. We have coming up this very weekend, the Rice Larpenter Summer Block Party. If you're looking for something fun to do, family fun, on Saturday, it is going to be at the corners of Rice and Larpenter. That's where the 3 cities, where Roseville, St. Paul, and Maplewood all come together. We're all one county, 3 cities, and it's the Summer Block Party. There will be food, there will be a band. The public safety folks will be out there from all 3 cities. There'll be vendors. I think it's going to be a really great event. It is from 11 to 3 o'clock. And I think we're going to, Mr. Sharon, I see you in the audience. We're going to have something on our website. Thank you very much. You can check our website for more information about Rice Larpenter. And I think the last thing I had was National Night Out. It sure was great to get out. I got to, 6 parties. It would have been a 7th, but I think they canceled at the last minute. But it really was fun to move around in the community and really get out and see people and talk with people. Council members, I know I saw some of you, and we were passing and going to the different parties. I think we had 47 registered, several canceled, I think, due to COVID, but we still had a really good number of parties. I know I had fun seeing our fire department, our police, our public safety officers out there. I'll give each council member an opportunity to reflect on National Night Out, because we've kind of missed that the last couple of years. Councilmember Cave, let's start with you.
Sure. I had my daughter, my college daughter, and my granddaughter with me. We went down to South Maplewood. We had a couple down there, and then I actually ended up in Oakdale at my parents'. So they were by the fire station, so I got that one too.
Crossover.
Cross the
Won't hold that
barriers.
against you going
No.
over to Oakdale. Councilmember Juniman.
Yes, I was supposed to get to 5, but I got to 5, but 2 of them weren't happening, and neither one of them had been canceled ahead of time, but I understand with the heat in particular, that had something to do with it. But the one closest to my house in my neighborhood, this person has it almost every year, but you could tell it had been a while, and there were a lot of people, and so we met new people in the neighborhood, lots of kids who went stark raving crazy when the fire truck pulled in. Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. You'd swear they had never seen one in their whole lives. So, they were all crawling up on the bumper for a picture, and it was a fun night. People were enjoying each other's company, and they were talking about how nice it was that we were back to doing this, and that the city would send staff out. People really do appreciate seeing people in their neighborhoods. So it was fun.
Yeah.
A little warm, but fun.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
I just had a wonderful night. I usually do like 5 or 6, but we ended up only going to 3, probably because it was so hot. But I was hoping that we hit quality over quantity. It was great we got to South Maplewood as well, so I think it was really good to connect to folks down there, because sometimes they feel like they're not part of us, and so it was great to listen. It reminds me how awesome Maplewood residents are. They're just like so friendly and so nice usually, and just had a lot of fun and some good food. So I thank all the residents for their warmness.
Good. Councilmember Knutson.
Yeah, I had a great time. Even one had music, which was great. And my wife said, "Did you eat all the food?" And I was so busy, I didn't have any food at anywhere I went, as much as offered. One thing that was funny, though, is I went to St. Jerome's, and they had canceled, but I saw people in the basement. So I went down there, and there were 4 tables of people, and 2 cops that were there for something else, apparently. So I came right down to the table, and they looked at me like, "What? Yes?" Then on my way out, I knocked a purse on the ground and tried to pick it up, and the cop said, do you want me to arrest him? And the table, of course, sure, so it was
Sure.
kind of interesting. It was fun, yeah, and so it was a great evening.
That's good. And I, too, had a great evening. It was a lot of fun, and I want to say compliments to our Public Safety Department for passing out soccer balls. They are a huge hit, and I saw a lot of them going out. I was over at Our Redeemer Church, and they had a band, and they had all sorts of food and raffles and things going on, and there were a lot of soccer balls that were getting passed out over there, so that was really fun. So, okay, council members, thank you very much. Moving on, we have 2 items on our consent agenda.
I will move consent agenda items G1 and 2.
Second.
Moved by Cave, seconded by Juniman, the motion to approve consent agenda items G1 and 2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We have no public hearings tonight. We have some unfinished business, a resolution making findings of fact and conclusions on repeat nuisance service calls appeal with Emma Norton Services. Mr. Beatty, this is your topic for tonight.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council. In June, the city issued 2 notices to Emma's Place for excessive calls and the fees that were associated with those. Emma's Place appealed, as they are allowed to do under city code, and also as provided in city code, a hearing was held 2 weeks ago tonight that I'm sure all of you remember. The result of the ordinance requires that as a result of that, the council adopt findings of fact and conclusions. And so in your packet is a resolution that I drafted, which I think reflects the findings of fact and conclusions. And if the council agrees, it's available for your adoption or modification if you feel that's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Is there a motion?
I will move, excuse me.
Is there a second?
I will make move the resolution making findings of fact and conclusion on the repeat nuisance service call appeal by Emma Norton Services.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Cave, the motion to adopt the resolution entitled Resolution Making Findings of Fact and Conclusions on Appeal by Emma Norton Services regarding fees for excessive nuisance service calls. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to new business, we have council members, I just want to pause here for a moment and recognize that we are now talking about road projects for next year. Feasibility studies, we're starting the whole cycle again. We're not even done with construction season, and we're talking about next season, but this is a way for us to get all of this planning done ahead of time. So, Mr. Love, we're back at it again.
Yes.
New projects.
Mayor and Council, good evening. So you're correct. This is our very first step in the whole CIP street reconstruction process, is the start of the feasibility. So the first project here is the Myrtle Sterling area project. The map here, the roads that are shown in black are proposed to be as part of that project. There's the neighborhood there south of Holloway Avenue. And then there's also Mary and Sterling in Idaho, just south of Larpenteur there. So if you might remember, we had a recent project that did the streets of Montana and Montana Circle. So we're kind of picking up where that project ended and finishing off the rest of that. And part of that is due to the fact the project to the south was a different type of project. It was a reclaim project where these are going to be potentially full reconstruction on some of these streets. Overall, there's 1.64 miles of streets on this with an average pavement condition index of 37 on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being a brand-new road. So certainly some streets that are in tough condition. If the council does authorize the feasibility report, this really gives our staff the go-ahead to start doing things such as soil borings, topographic surveys, working with the residents, hosting our neighborhood meetings, and as we gather information and develop what the overall project is going to be and how much it might cost. So with that, I am available for any questions.
Council members, are there any questions for Mr. Love about our first street project for 2023? I don't see any.
Oh.
Okay. Rebecca has one.
Oh.
No
Councilmember
question,
Jay.
just a comment that I know these streets, when we talked about them before, they weren't in the project, and they're definitely ones that needed to be done, so. That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Their rating is 37 on
Yeah.
a scale of 1 to 100, so we know that they're pretty bad. Okay, council members, is there a motion?
I move the resolution ordering preparation of feasibility study for the Myrtle Sterling Area Street Improvement City Project 22-16.
Second?
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Knutson. The motion to approve the attached resolution ordering the preparation of a feasibility study for the Myrtle Sterling Area Street Improvement City Project 22-16. Is there any further discussion?
To
Councilmember
get out of that
Knutson.
church basement, I had to promise a little street improvement down there, so I just wanted to put that, no, kidding.
Okay, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Moving on, we have another feasibility study for Woodland South Lawn Area Pavement Rehabilitation. Mr. Love.
Yes, Mayor and Council. So this project is probably more of our traditional reclaim project for the most part. You can see that there are a number of streets here. This one's a little bit more spread out. So, you know, we generally try to group them in a neighborhood, but sometimes we have to pick up the little pieces that hadn't got done yet. So one of the big differences is Woodland is a 4-lane road. And so certainly as we look at this in the feasibility, we'll be taking a review of it to see if there's any road diet that needs to happen there, like maybe a 4-lane to 3-lane conversion. So with this project, there's 1.77 miles of street and has a pavement condition index of 37 out of 100 again. So certainly two projects that are, in need of improvement. Again, the project does allow staff to begin that whole communication process with the residents and gathering of all the information, both topographic and soil conditions and pavement sections. And this really allows us to prepare that feasibility report and give you guys an idea of what the project needs, how much that cost is, and how that would be funded. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Council members, do you have any questions?
This is just another one that I don't think we need to question. Does it need to be done?
Bump, bump, bump. I was just driving down it last week, and it's really bumpy. Yeah, so,
To approve the attached resolution ordering the preparation of a feasibility study for the Woodland South Lawn Area Pavement Rehabilitation City Project 22-17.
Second.
moved by Cave, seconded by Juniman. The motion to
Poor
approve the
response.
attached resolution ordering the preparation of a feasibility study for the Woodland South Lawn Area Pavement Rehabilitation City Project 22-17. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Mayor?
Councilmember Juniman.
This didn't fit with these particular streets, but I just have to comment that if you've been over by Hy-Vee lately and just that section of Jarvis where they're redoing, it's like, wow. It's like smooth.
Oh,
It's
yes.
not even the final coat. It's just like,
That's
oh my goodness. I'm sure the people that going into those businesses are going, wait a minute, am I in the right place?
Especially the people that live along the side of
Yes.
Jarvis,
Cottages,
on either
yeah.
side, the
Yes.
cottages, and then
Yes.
the, I'm drawing a blank on the other,
Hazel. It's
The-
Hazelwood, way down.
I'm sorry, the other
Side
Going the
of
other
by,
way,
by
yeah.
Cub.
Yes,
And
yes.
The North St. Paul aerial and
Yep, Ariel.
It's just
with the
phenomenal.
sidewalks and everything.
Phenomenal that it is now smooth and that they can't hear it from their homes anymore, which is,
So-
you know, they're certainly not going to miss that. So
No,
that really
it
is
is
very nice.
going very well.
Yeah. So, moving on, we have the options regarding edible THC products. Mr. Beatty, or Ms. Coleman, Mr. Beatty is going to do this one? Okay, Mr. Beatty, this is yours.
Madam Mayor, Council, this is a follow-up on the brief discussion that we had 2 weeks ago. On July 1st, a new statute became effective which authorized the sale of what are now called edible THC products. There's also a liquid form, but they're typically called edibles. It was something that I don't think most of us were aware that was coming down the pike. I was not aware of it, and my firm represents about 50 cities, and I don't think any of the attorneys in my office were aware of this. So there was obviously a lot of scrambling. As a result of that, the ordinance, or the statute, I should say, which became effective on July 1st, is a pretty thin statute. It does allow the sale of these edibles. It establishes the dosage, the percentage of the active ingredient that can be in it, the size of the individual package or the individual items, the number of them that can be in a package. They can't be marketed towards children. They can't be put in packages that have cartoon characters or other such things. Probably the most substantive restriction is that they can't be sold to anybody under the age of 21. However, there's no restriction on purchasing them or possessing them, so that if a person under 21 goes in and attempts to purchase it or does purchase it, and if there's a sale, the person who sells has committed a crime, but the person who has purchased does not. That's just a distinction between that and what you see with tobacco and alcohol, where there's a violation on both sides. The State Board of Pharmacy is the state entity that's been given overall direction on this, or oversight on this, but
That makes no sense either.
well, they have a total of 23 employees for the entire state. So they are, for good reasons, not really able to do very much about it. There's no state licensing. There's no indication in the statute whether cities are permitted or prohibited from enforcing this. And so what we're having to rely on is our general police power. So I think it is possible for cities to do something about this. And so the question is, what? And what the memo really outlines in very brief form are some of the more obvious things the city could do. One of them is to declare a moratorium, which would prevent any, or at least theoretically, prevent any additional retailers from selling the product. The limitation of that is pretty obvious, because in most cases, we use a moratorium for land use items, where you declare a moratorium on no new gas stations or no new fast food restaurants. And it's pretty easy to determine whether there's a new gas station or fast food restaurant, because it's a land use and you can see it. Here's a retail product that's going to be sold on aisle 17 next to the candy bars. You know, it doesn't have the same characteristics. So we can still do a moratorium on that, but from a practical standpoint, you can see the difficulty of trying to enforce that. And it would only apply to any retailer that had not currently started sales. And of course, it would be difficult, I think, to determine whether the sales had started before or afterwards. But anyway, that is an option. And when you declare a moratorium, you also order a study, because the whole point of a moratorium is to declare a timeout so that the city can take a step back and study the subject and determine what, if anything, it wants. It has a year to do that, but you certainly don't have to take that period of time. But anyway, that's one option. Another option that I think will eventually come out at some point is some sort of regulation. I think the licensing of places that sell the product is probably the most accurate model for that. Think of what we do for tobacco, think of what we do for alcohol. You could establish, the age is already established, but you could require that sales be behind the counter, that you'd have to ID people. I mean, you could do a number of things that I think would supplement the deficiencies of the statute in terms of trying to keep this product out of the hands of people that you probably don't want to see it in. And I think ultimately that's probably what's going to happen. The other regulatory approach that is possible is zoning, although I think that's going to play a minor role because, again, it's not so much of a use. It's a retail product that can be sold in retail stores. And so if zoning comes to play a role, I think it will be a subsidiary role. You might have a licensing program and then only grant licenses in certain districts. But it's going to be licensing rather than zoning as the primary regulatory tool. And of course, the third thing is do nothing. I mean, it's very likely, I think, that the legislature will revisit this next year, and there may be additional changes to the statute so that we might have a better idea of what's going to happen. So I think those broadly are the options. But I'd also point out that you don't have to pick only one of those. In other words, the city could do a couple of those things. You could decide that ultimately what you're going to want to do is put a licensing scheme in place, and you could impose a moratorium temporarily, and then direct staff to at the same time start working on a licensing ordinance. The moratorium would be in effect for up to a year, but it certainly doesn't have to be that long, and so we could then adopt a licensing ordinance, and then the moratorium would expire. Or you could choose to do nothing, but also direct staff to prepare a licensing ordinance and bring it back as soon as possible. You know, I've drafted a couple of moratoria. I think that's the most common approach that I've seen, but again, the longer we get from July 1st, probably, you know, the horse is out of the barn more and more. I know a couple of cities have adopted licensing schemes. I haven't drafted one, I haven't read one, but I know those are out there. So that broadly speaking, those are the options, and you know, this is just a presentation for your consideration, and we're looking for direction as to how you wish to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty, for that. I want to thank Councilmember Kay for bringing this up and bringing this to the council's attention. It looks like everyone wants to talk because I think we all have an opinion on this. You know, I'm going to jump out first. You know, I think that from what I've read in the paper and from what seems to be the consensus from talking with other mayors is that everyone was really pretty surprised about this and unprepared. And I feel very unprepared to decide what we need to be doing about this. And so my interest would be in establishing a moratorium for up to a year and directing staff to do some research on this. I've also talked to our legislative contingencies that represent the city of Maplewood, and they have assured me that they believe that this is going to go back to the legislature because there's so many unanswered questions. And so I would hate for us to spend a lot of time coming up with a licensing plan or whatever it may be, and then the legislature is going to make changes anyway, and so then we have to revisit it. So what I would like to suggest is the moratorium, and that staff research it, that we look and see what the legislature does, and that we incorporate all of that. So then we take one efficient action, but that we institute a moratorium as soon as we possibly could. That would be my favor, and I don't remember who, Councilmember Juniman, you were next. What is your
Yes, indeedy.
point?
Once again, they don't just open the barn door, they kick the horse down the road and then go, oh, by the way, did you know the horse was going to get out? Thank you so much. And everyone you talk to that's in any kind of a regulating job of any kind has gone, what the heck was that? My response is, it's an election year. What do you think it was? Parrish thought they'd think anything through. I agree with you, Mayor. I think we should do the moratorium and then start looking at licensing. And I'd like to think that the legislature will revisit it and do something. I'm not willing to stick my neck out and say they'll do something. They'll look at it, but will they do anything? I don't know. I was sitting here when we had to do the no smoking in restaurants in Maplewood because neither the state nor the county had any balls, so we had to do it first. So this could well end up the same way. Cities will do it, and finally the legislature will go, oh my goodness, look at that. Yeah, oh my goodness, look at that. Do your homework. So, if they want to drop it in our laps, let's be better than they are. It isn't hard to be smarter, so let's just get on it and be ready to meet it.
Okay, so moratorium. Councilmember Cave, you're next.
I would agree with the moratorium, but just to clarify, Mr. Beatty, we put one in place, but yet we don't know, number one, we don't know the retailers right now who have it, and we don't know retailers who will be getting it. It's kind of just a word we're throwing out there.
No, it's heads up.
Okay, it's a heads up, but it really doesn't have teeth.
Mr. Beatty.
Madam Mayor, Council, I think that's the downside, because, again, as opposed to a land use, which is obvious, and you can not permit the new fast food or gas station, it would take enforcement going in to retailers to check to see whether they're selling the product, and then the inquiry is, when did you start, post or pre moratorium? And so I think realistically, as a practical matter, where there's not going to be very effective enforcement. I think it would be, if you do that, I think it would be more of a statement on the part of the council, then I think it would make sense to follow up with at least an exploration of alternatives. I will certainly be watchful of licensing ordinances, even if you don't direct me to draft one. They will be circulating through my office, and I can certainly provide Melinda with some samples. And so, one of the problems with being first out the gate is that you then have to invent the wheel. And so it's better to let other people spend some time and energy, and we can collect their best ideas when we get ready to actually adopt something.
Thank you. And I would go with that. I think, the moratorium for a statement, but I also think having Mr. Beatty watch, and let's get something prepared, because like Kathy said, I don't want to wait for somebody, to do something. I'd rather be prepared, because it's going to be a funding issue. We're going to have to go around, we're going to figure out licensing fees, and we're going to have, police or whatever. It's going to be a time-consuming thing. So I think it's something we have to look at, and I appreciate you doing that at your office, is looking and giving Melinda, a heads up so we can see.
And we certainly want to do it right. We don't want to go back and have to redo this.
Yep.
So, good point.
Depends on what the legislature does.
Councilmember Knudsen, I think you were next, and then Councilmember Villavicencio.
I had the same questions as Councilmember Cave, so I support the conversation we just had. And I don't see any real effective enforcement, so I hope, Public Safety Director Bierman can rest easy with. So, thank you.
Other duties as assigned.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Well, I guess maybe I'm one of those weird people, but I guess it wasn't that surprising to me. It's typical of Minnesota. We have light beer in Minnesota. We have light weed in Minnesota. So, it makes sense. The legislature passed medical marijuana in 2014. They've been talking about gummies and concentrates for years now. I guess from my perspective, I'm not okay with a moratorium. I have spoke to multiple tobacco stores in Maplewood, and many of them have already bought product and are selling it as of now. And so I don't feel that it's fair to the businesses that have already invested in the product, because obviously the product can't just sit on the shelf until the moratorium is over. The other thing is I think licensing makes the most sense. I think that could look a lot of different ways, as Mr. Beatty said. Zoning, I think that could or could not make sense. Doesn't really at this point. I think, like Mr. Beatty said, when the legislature gets back together, they're probably going to clarify this rule, but I don't think it's going to change that much, the current law. I do, however, have been talking to the League of Minnesota Cities, and I joined their work group on THC. So when I get more information, I'll make sure to share it with everybody here. And you know, I think Mr. Beatty alluded to, or I think he said, you know, they're waiting for a lot of information from the Department of Revenue, unfortunately, on whether cities can charge another fee for food and beverage tax. So, I mean, if anything, I think this has a potential to make a little bit of money for the city. So, something to keep in mind, too.
Thank you. Mr. Beatty, do you want to respond to Councilmember Villavicencio's concerns?
Well, Madam Mayor, Council, let me clarify. The moratorium, I do not think would affect anybody who had begun to sell prior to the adoption of the ordinance. So I don't think you have to worry about anyone who's already invested. It would at least theoretically prevent new people from entering to the market. And I know that there are business groups who will push back on that basis alone, that it's unfair. So, I mean, I know one of our cities has already received a lengthy memorandum from business groups urging the city not to adopt a moratorium, and we might receive a similar thing. So there's the potential unfairness of allowing some people to do this and others not to do it. But to address your point directly, it would not affect, or at least the ordinance that I would propose to draft would not prevent anybody who had already invested in doing so. I'm not sure if I mentioned the Department of Revenue. It was the Pharmacy Board that I did mention. You know, in terms of, there would be a regulatory scheme that we'd have to come up with, as Councilmember Cave mentions. We'd have to figure out the licensing criteria. There'd probably have to be some sort of compliance checks put in place like we do for tobacco and so forth. So there's some cost. I think there would be a fee involved, but you know, the legal essence of a fee is that it's not a revenue producer. It's to cover costs. So I think the best we could do would be to try to cover our costs and have this not cost us anything, but I don't think we should count on it raising net revenue for the city.
Thank you very much for that. It seems to me that 4 council members are in favor of going forward with a moratorium. And obviously, that's something that, Mr. Beatty, you and your office would have to draft for us. And then during that moratorium, the purpose of the moratorium would be for us to consider all of those things that you identified in terms of regulation and enforcement and fees, and what does all of that look like? Because I have a sense that we have kind of been caught off guard with incorporating this into our city and how we run our city. So I think that gives direction that you have 4 council members that want to move forward with that moratorium. So I would ask that council members that maybe at our next meeting, is that soon enough?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Is that possible?
Yes, I would dust off one of the other ordinances that I've drafted and tweak it a little bit, I think, for the city. But yes, it would be on your agenda for 2 weeks from tonight.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more comments. I think Councilmember Juniman and then Councilmember Knutson.
I think it is fascinating if you were watching the news the night before this was to become law. They were interviewing the people who came up with this wonderful idea, and it was intentional that they kept it under wraps because they didn't want anybody derailing it before the vote was taken. Fascinating. And for anybody who wants to whine about it isn't fair, to quote my mother and her mother before that, and probably her mother before that, life ain't fair.
Thank you. Councilmember Knutson.
As a practical matter, isn't this moratorium more for us? Yeah. I mean, you know, we're not going to, Mr. Beardman isn't going to go out and do a lot of enforcement and all that, so practical matters for us to get our thoughts together and do this.
Right, we want to do
on
it
behalf-
right.
Do it right, yeah.
It's a
It's
state
more of a
law, we
statement.
understand that,
you.
but we want to be able to do it right. And right now, we have nothing in place in order to implement this, and I think that's the frustration that so many cities are having, that, what are we going to do for licensing? How are we going to do enforcement? Is it going to be, are we going to have enforcement checks? What are fines? I mean, what does it look like? Is zoning going to be part of it? That takes time, and I would rather this is really a breather for us to get all of the information and make sure that we do it right, and we can learn from other people as well. And Councilmember Villavicencio, thank you for joining the work group, and please report back to us. But Mr. Beatty, is that enough direction?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it certainly is.
Thank you very much. Council members, I want to take note, it is 8:05. We have gone through our agenda, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.